I've been part of Miles for Migraine for about 2.5 years, coming almost on 3. It's been a great part of my life. I've got my parents involved now that you can see them on the call, and I'm going to keep ringing in people. But today's event is going to be hosted by Lisa Benson. Lisa is a sculptor, writer, advocate for migraine awareness. She cares about awareness since she was undiagnosed for over 20 years, which allowed her migraine to worsen over time. Finally diagnosed in 2011 and living with chronic migraine, she worked hard to educate herself and navigate the medical world to find efficient treatment for her condition, though this is ever changing. Lisa has 10 plus years experience as a professional sculptor at Skylight Studios and the Caproni Collection, and has written over 100 articles on migraine.com. Her advocacy, she presented at Retreat Migraine in 2020 and 2022 and volunteers for Headache on the Hill and Miles for Migraine. And before I hand it off to Lisa, I want to promote some of our next big events. Our next educational event will be July 14th. To talking about tools to help navigate your child migraine disease at school. And then our next social event will be sometime in September, hosted by 2 of my favorite humans. I call them mom and dad, but they're known as Dito and Alicia, doing an herb garden tutorial. So with that being said, I'm going to hand it over to Lisa to walk us through today's event.
Thanks, Dina. And I love your parents too. I still have my herb garden from last year. So I'm curious who has either their brain mold or something else that they're going to cast today during the event. We got Laura, Dina. Okay, we got a couple of you. That's awesome. And so I'll start off by showing a couple of us cast our brains. Which sounds really funny, but I'll show you mine. I painted the plaster afterward. Today, we're just going to be doing the casting, which is the white plaster. If you have questions about painting it, I can answer those. There's also a couple other really awesome brains that were painted on the call. I don't know if Laura and Katie, I know you did some. I don't know if people have done them. Want to hold them up real quick just to show. Cool. So what we're going to do is we're here at the art studio where I work, and I'm going to do a tour so you can get a sneak peek into what it's like to work in an art studio and be a sculptor. And we do mainly commission sculptures, so it's not like an art studio where we're like, oh, what do I feel like making today? It's more like, this person really needs this thing, and that is what we're doing, which is really fun and engaging and rewarding. So I'll talk about that. But because plaster takes a little time to dry, I want to do the demo and encourage anyone who wants to join in. If you want to just watch the demo, even if you have your mold and you're like, I'm not feeling it today, a reminder that these videos go up on YouTube, and so you can always come back and watch it again. I'm a little bit of a Miles for Migraine YouTube junkie myself, so I encourage everyone to always check it out. But a couple things. So if you are doing this, you should have your mold. This is called a mold, and the material is silicone. And this is actually a mold making material that started in the space age. So before the invention of things like silicone, which they used in like rocket ships and stuff, we had like gelatin molds, which were sometimes made from horses' hooves, but they are also bendable, but not quite as good as these. And before that, we used just plaster as a mold, which is fine in terms of getting the detail, but if you have a plaster mold, you can't bend it, so you have to have a shape that you can pull out. So silicone molds are such a great invention in the art and sculpture world. So you should have your mold, and now you know a little bit more about it. And then everyone got a box of plaster, but then I'll give everyone a minute because you're going to need to find, it's better to have a cup like either a disposable cup or something that you don't care about. I have like this old yogurt container. It doesn't have to be this big. This is actually like, if you're filling this brain, this is like way too, if you fill this up, it would be like way too much water. But you want to get a cup, and then it's helpful to have like 1 or 2 plastic spoons. Don't worry if you don't have a spoon. You could get like, you can actually use a metal spoon. You'll just have to wipe it off, and I can talk about that in a minute. But if you have a plastic spoon, that's better. Then you don't have to worry about if it, gets plaster caked on it or whatever. And then what you want to do is take your container, and I just put like the tiniest bit of water in. I think I filled it up maybe like a centimeter, because this mold is very small, and you end up adding plaster to it. So actually, if I pour this water in the mold, that's something you can do. You can actually fill up your mold with water and then put that in your container. But it might be helpful to have just a little extra, just because some could spill, and it's also a little tricky to mix just a small amount of plaster. So I'll give people a minute to do that. I'm just going to scroll through and see if people, it looks like some people have left their chairs. I see Dina, you're holding up a container.
Is this too small of a container?
No, that's good, because you don't want to have a container that's more than half full, because you'll run out of space. But you filled it up about a quarter of the way or less, so you're fine. Did anyone have any questions while I give people a minute to gather things?
You have to spray or grease the mold. I saw that on a video that it's recommended.
That is a really good question. I actually didn't catch you asked it, but no, we don't, because for this kind of silicone and the plaster we're using, you don't need a mold release. That's what it's called. There are occasions in which you do, but that's what's really nice about these kind of simple silicone molds that you can get now, is that they don't stick to the plaster. There are other materials that you might be casting in, or other kinds of silicone that you would have to, but for this, you just need your mold and your plaster. Did anyone else have any questions? Okay, so I'm going to move my phone. So if you get a little dizzy with motion, just look away for a second. Oh, one more thing actually, before I move my phone, is that you never want to pour plaster down a sink. So once you've mixed the plaster, you're either going to want to use it, wait for it to dry and like throw it away, or like wipe it out with a rag and throw it in the trash or something. But if you pour it down the sink, it'll dry and then it'll clog your pipes. So like, please work it, if you can, work in a container that you can just throw away. If you happen to have other silicone molds, say you use them for baking or whatever, you could always pour the extra plaster in those. But yeah, that's just something that's really important. So I'm going to now move my phone. So if you get dizzy, just hold off for a minute. And I'm trying to find the best. Oh, I'll flip my screen actually. There must be a way to do that. Aha, I found it. Okay. Here we go. So I'm going to hold it as steady as I can. So if you're, but I am now in one spot. So you see I have this container here, and the question is how much plaster to put in and how to put it in. So the best way to do it, and I'll really slowly pan over, is to take like a little bit at a time with your spoon and kind of just sprinkle it in. And if you don't have a spoon, you can use your hands. It's good not to get too much plaster dust whipping around, because you don't want to breathe in dust in any kind of case. But so what you want to do is keep sprinkling it in. And what I'm waiting to see is when the plaster starts to collect at the top and makes like a little island. So while I'm doing this, does anyone have any questions about how to get started?
I didn't wait until you told us the instructions, so I just started. Mine's really pasty. What is the correct ratio of water versus
Ah,
powder?
you might want to start again because you can't add water back to it
Oh,
because
okay.
it'll weaken the plaster. So that's why we have to add in this very specific way. And so what happens is, you know, the ratio once you start to get an island.
Just turns, you start to clump in the middle.
Mm, okay.
So
Tip
I'm
for
gonna,
everyone else, follow instructions. I will restart.
yeah, sorry, Tina. I know
I
it's
have a-
exciting to get started. So see how, can you guys see how I'm starting to get a little bit of a plaster island
A little bit long.
in the center there? And so
Yeah.
now I'm taking the plaster and I'm kind of putting it a little bit on the edges. And what you
Like
want
building up.
is,
Yeah.
yes, yeah. And so now this is almost enough, or probably enough. It doesn't have to be perfect, but now that I have this little island, it's ready to mix. And what we're going to look for is the consistency of kind of like a Greek yogurt, or like a regular yogurt, but a little bit thicker. And I haven't mixed it yet. So like, the thing that makes plaster dry is a little bit more of a chemical reaction. And so like mixing it causes that chemical reaction. Another thing that will cause it to go too fast is hot water. So I didn't mention this, but using cold water is best. But so when you mix it, you want to take your spoon and kind of mix it more towards the bottom, because you don't want to get a lot of air bubbles. And I'll sort of show you the consistency. See how it's a little bit like a yogurt? And you just want to mix it enough so that there are no lumps. So this is actually probably fine, but I'll give people a minute or two to just catch up. And if you have questions or want to show yours and ask me if it looks okay, or anything like that, that would be fine.
I feel like mine's really watery, like it moves really quick. I don't know if you can see it. I don't know if this is.
Can you pick it up with the spoon and show me how it drips? I think it's probably okay.
Okay.
So if you see mine drips a little too.
Okay.
And you know what, what will happen is if it's too watery, it just won't be as strong. It'll probably still like dry and be usable, but it just won't be like, if you drop it, it would be more likely to break, but you don't really want to be dropping your brain anyway. Maybe sometimes we want to drop our brains in this group, but
What do you do if it's really thick?
if it's too thick, you can just try it and see if it works, and if not, just once it dries and if it doesn't quite work out, just do it again.
Okay.
You can technically add water, but it really does weaken the plaster, so I don't recommend it. There's
And
a
will
pretty
it,
Yep, go
oh,
ahead.
sorry. Will it wash out of your clothes if it sprayed on my shirt?
I would rinse off your shirt before it has time to dry.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll wash out of like your hair and your skin and stuff. Although if you're a guy and you have a lot of like arm hair, it can kind of stick to that and not be so fun. So I'm going to show you me pouring mine. I'm trying to keep the camera as still as possible, so I hope I'm not making anyone dizzy, but you pour it in until it's not quite all the way to the top. You want to leave a little space at the top, because what you're going to do after you pour it is actually bounce it. And when you see I'm bouncing it, you'll see little air bubbles show at the top. And all those air bubbles were trapped air in there that if you don't bounce it, you'll see the air bubbles on the surface of your piece. So I usually bounce it until I don't see any new air bubbles coming up, which for these, it shouldn't be that long that you have to bounce it for like maybe a minute or two. And then once you've finished doing that, you pour just a little bit more in to fill it the whole way. And then I accidentally just overfilled mine. So luckily I'm on a table that is meant for plaster casting, so I'm just going to scrape it off. But if you overfill it, you can always also take some out with your spoon and just put it back in your container. And then I might bounce it again, or agitate it, might be the technical term, but and then you want it to dry on a flat surface. If it's tilted, you'll have, it won't, this part here, which is the bottom, it won't be flat. So you want to dry it on a flat surface. So now I'm going to, since I've finished the demo, I'm going to flip my camera back around and put it in front of me. So again, if you get dizzy, just cover your eyes for a second. Starting now. All right, I have my camera back up, so you're safe. And where's everyone at? Are people still pouring, still mixing? People have questions? So this container and this spoon, I don't care about. So there's some plaster in here. I mean, if I cared about the spoon, what I would do is take a rag and wipe it off. And then you can wash it in the sink, and there's not enough plaster on it to really matter. But no one mentioned a spoon, so I'm assuming everyone has something plastic. And then if you had an extra mold, this is still good for, you probably still have some working time of maybe 10 minutes or so. You could always pour it into something, but if not, you can either just let it dry and throw the whole container out. If you want to reuse the container, we reuse containers all the time here. You can actually let it dry and then like bang it to break out the pieces. So it's totally up to you. Like if there's enough plaster in these kits to probably do 20 brains. So if you want to keep going, you can pour out your container and yeah, you know what I'm saying. I just like, what am I talking about? Yeah. So I want to just wait until everyone who wanted to pour a mold did, and then I'll start the tour. And then at around 5 o'clock, we'll check our molds to see if they seem dry enough to take out, and I can show you how to do that. So is anyone still working, or are people ready for the tour? I'm going to take the silence. Oh yeah, Laurie?
Lisa, is it okay to have air bubbles sitting on the top?
That's fine, because the top will end up being the bottom. So if
Okay.
you see mine really close, you can actually see the air bubbles.
Okay.
But it doesn't matter because it's not a part of the sculpture you'll see. If you do have air bubbles that show up on the top that are bothering you, you can't fix them with plaster because once this plaster is dry, if you put wet plaster on it, you could do it immediately, but if you do it like after it's dry, then it'll soak in all the moisture from the new plaster and then it'll start to crack. But what you can do is use like the spackle that you use to fill a hole in your wall. You can take a little on your finger and just rub it in an air bubble. So even if you wanted to get the bottom, you could. I think I answered like your question and 3 others, but.
No, thank you.
Yeah. So I am going to turn off my camera because I'm going to walk upstairs and I don't want to make anyone dizzy. And then I'm going to turn it back on and show you guys the life of a sculptor.
Lori, I don't know if you can see mine. Do you see my air bubbles on the bottom of mine? So
I
that's how it'll come out.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yep.
What kind of paint did you use to paint that? Was it acrylic or?
Oh, no, this was, they're called paint markers.
Okay,
So, and it was pretty cool. Like when I touched it, almost I'm sure she can talk about it. The paint almost like soaked in to the, what is it? Not clay,
Plaster.
plaster. Yeah, it like almost like soaked into it really quickly. So I kind of touched it really lightly and it just like absorbed right into it.
Yeah,
okay,
so
that
you
sounds
can
good.
use to paint it, you can't paint it the same day. I mean,
Yeah,
you'll have less control. You have to wait a couple days, but you can use acrylics, you can use paint markers, you can use regular just markers. You can use, I haven't tried watercolors, but I'm assuming that might have a cool effect. You can use like tempera paints, like kids paints, really anything. And what's nice is that you have the mold. So if you like don't like what happened, you could just make a new one.
true. And it had a very, very fine tip. Yeah, mine had a very fine tip. And Lisa did tell me, I waited 5 days to do it. You know, she said to make sure it was dry. I don't know if I needed to wait that long, but I did wait about 5 days to actually paint it.
It really varies. It depends on how hot or cool it is where you're keeping your plaster. And if you want to work on it sooner, put a fan in front of it and that'll plaster in the sculpture studio. So when people enter, there's like a little entryway here, but then, you know, I'm going to flip because you don't need to see me necessarily. So we have a lot of plaster casts that are kind of antiques. So when people enter, they'll see a lot of our antiques right away. And what's really cool is if you're familiar with the David in Florence, we have a cast of his head. So you can really get up and close to David's head. And this is the actual size of David.
Wow.
And people don't realize he has heart eyes.
Oh, wow.
And if you go up to the top, you can see the tool marks from Michelangelo. See these little marks here in the hair? And he looks kind of funny the way the iPhone camera will warp his head, but so that's really cool. And then we have this is actually a gilding project we're working on. This is for the old State House in Boston. It's a historic building that every once in a while we have to re-gild some of their architectural pieces. And so we actually take these little sheets of gold called gold leaf and we put them all over the sculpture or the object. So it's real gold actually that's being gilded on there. If we go in here, this is kind of our gallery. It's part of the, Dina said 2 business names at the beginning, and this is the Caproni Collection, which is we have a collection of plaster casts that we sell. So we actually have a website where people can go and buy them. And so these are our floor models, like a little gallery, but we can make any of these, including that head of David that you saw. This is like a full figure of Augustus Caesar. And what I really like about him is his, all the figures and reliefs on on his breastplate there. And I hope I'm keeping the camera steady enough for everyone. Back here.
You're doing a good job.
All right, thanks. Yeah, I know how dizziness can be with migraine, so I don't want to make anyone dizzy, but these are actually reproductions of Assyrian reliefs, and the originals are in the British Museum. And so you might be wondering how we have all these. And the basic story is that over like a little over 100 years ago, the Caproni brothers, that's where the name comes from, went to Europe and made molds of pieces in all the museums there. And that was something that now would be unheard of, to go there and like rub plaster all over precious works of art. But at the time, mold makers were revered as really skilled craftsmen and were really trusted. So they were able to do it. And we are keeping this collection alive. It's kind of has a little bit of a lineage, and we are now the stewards of it. It's just a joy to make these pieces for people and to be able to see them on a daily basis. This piece here is called the Pompeian Satyr, and he is in Pompeii in Italy. That's where that volcano erupted, and you can go and visit and see like incredibly preserved streets and houses. And this sculpture was found then too in bronze, and we're lucky to have a copy. So I just love his face. So I'll go to some of the work that we're doing. So that's our history of like reproductions, but we're also an active sculpture studio where we make our own work. And these are some clay pieces we're working on now. The sun is coming in funny, so it's a little bit bleaching out the video, but
Oh, where'd you go?
Lisa, you muted yourself if you're talking.
oh, thank you for telling me I muted myself. I would have just kept talking. These are two works in progress. They're actually part of the same sculpture, but we have them separate, and they're going to be this. This is the poster of our clay model, but they're called the Blackstone Canal builders, which is a canal local to us near Boston. And we were commissioned to sculpt the two surveyors who started the project.
Wow, that's amazing.
Just beautiful.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, this is
How
not.
tall are they? Lisa, how tall
These-
are they?
You know what I'll do? I'll stand in front of one and you can kind of get a sense of it.
Oh my.
So I mean, of course, it's not on the ground. It's like a couple feet above the ground, but they're larger than life. They're maybe eight feet tall or so.
Wow.
The draping of the fabric is exceptional.
Yeah. So these are not like a one-person job either. We've probably had at least 3 people working on these. So that's pretty fun. And like, even for that, like I actually haven't touched these that much. All I've done is I've worked on this guy's hair, and that was like a day's work. Just the sun is, yeah, just to get his hair. So, which you can barely even see.
And do you get up on ladders, or do you set up like a, what do you call that? boards and,
Like a scaffolding.
yeah,
We do-
scaffolding, thank you.
We do have this, I'm going to slowly pan over. We have this library ladder, but
Oh,
luckily
yeah.
when I was working on his hair, we
That's
had
good.
just had his head on a stick. So it was, yeah, it was eye level. So this is the ladder that we'll use though for parts that we can't remove. And so if you see, let me show you something that I think is kind of cool. So we have what's called a Roman joint, and this connects the arm to the sculpture. So this pin holds the arm in, so we can actually take this arm off and work on it separately and mold it and cast it separately. So these are going to be molded. This clay doesn't dry. It's called plastoline. It's an oil-based clay, and it kind of feels like regular pottery clay, but it's a little bit waxier. And it really is sensitive to temperature. So in the summer, it's very soft. And in the winter, it's very hard. And in the winter, we often warm it up with like a hair dryer. So it's a little bit more workable. But this clay never dries. So we use it over and over. So what will happen is when these are all done being sculpted, we'll take like a silicone very similar to our brain molds, and we'll make a mold of them, but in pieces. And then over the silicone, because as you saw, the silicone's really bendable, we'll do a plaster shell to keep its place, which we don't need to do on our brains because they're so small, it's going to keep its shape anyway. But for something this big, it definitely is needed. And then this is another portrait we're doing for another local Boston. So this is the reference photo behind in the portrait. And again, I've been working on his hair. I worked on his bow tie. So it's really fun. And then I'll show you a completed piece that the mold and the cast are done, but we kept the clay, and it's this huge horse. It's called the charging horse. And it's actually for, I don't know if anyone is in Connecticut or near Connecticut, but it's for the University of New Haven. Their mascot is a charging horse. So we got to make this huge horse. And the angle is really funny on the phone, but I swear it's in proportion. And it's in bronze on their campus. So.
Oh, in bronze.
Yeah.
Lisa, how do you get these in and out of the studio?
So when we make the molds are in pieces. And actually you asked the question at like the perfect time, Laura, because I was about to show everyone these lines. Each of these lines is where we separated out each piece of a mold. So we take them out in small pieces.
Oh, and then you reassemble them?
Yeah, well, so then the mold pieces are sent to a bronze foundry. The bronze foundry casts the pieces, and then they're reassembled there, and then they're often like put on a truck to then be trucked out to the location.
Wow.
So there's no seams at that point.
Correct. These seams will all be chased in the bronze, and then we have these lines here that indicate where pieces connect. And then sometimes one of us will go to the foundry to check on, making sure that it looks okay. But in the time of COVID, because there are a lot of our foundries are out of state. So in the time of COVID, we've often had to rely on pictures too, but we take detailed photos of the piece and how it looks from every angle as well, so that the people in the foundry can follow those to get it back together right. So that there's a whole long process of getting it from the clay to the plaster. And then if you see it's on this like wooden box, that wooden box is usually going to be the proportion of whatever stone that it's going to be mounted on. So then we have to work with a granite company, and we work a lot with people up in Vermont because there's a lot of really beautiful granite in Vermont, which is nice because we're in Boston, so it's like theoretically local. I mean, it's still a little far, but and then that granite needs to be designed and cut and sometimes engraved with certain words and things too. So that's a whole other part of the process. And then
And
yeah, so that's kind of that there's a lot that goes into just
and is
one
each piece,
sculpture.
is each piece hollowed out?
Yeah, each piece is, the clay isn't hollow, the clay has a structure underneath, but the bronze casts are all cast hollow.
How long did that take to make that from like beginning to end, like the bronze, the whole thing?
It took a few years, but there was probably a year or two of just, we made some design sketches, and then the committee at the college looked at the sketches, and then they said, hey, we like this from this sketch and that from that sketch. Then we did another round of sketches. Then we did a maquette. And in this case, they ended up changing their minds after the first maquette. We literally went back to the drawing board. I like all the analogies that actually are really what we do, like back to the drawing board, or hey, at least it's not set in stone, doesn't apply to us. So then we had to do another round of sketches and then another maquette. And a maquette is like, see, this is a smaller version of this. So that's the maquette. Then they will approve, the committee will approve this maquette. And that is what we use to size up and make an armature, which there's two ways we'll do that. One way is like the old fashioned, we use rulers and math to measure, and we create an armature by hand that's all out of metal and plaster and wood. But in this case, because of a shorter timeline, we utilized modern technology, and we actually had this piece digitally scanned, and then we had it milled out of foam. And I don't know that I can, actually, I'm going to move really slow, but I'll show you. If you look down here, you can see a little white peeking out. That's the foam underneath. And then that foam is sent to us in pieces. And then we'll put the foam together and then put like a metal armature in that foam. But that doesn't have any of the detail. And often the sizes are wrong, because when you make a small piece, you don't realize the head is too big because it's too small to see that. And so we can carve into the foam, and we can put, like, this is all covered in clay, so you can carve into the foam and then put clay on it to get all the details. So that is the process that we used with this, because we didn't have as much time, so that really speeds it up.
So you don't fire it, given the oily clay.
Yes,
So
that's correct.
So does the clay have to be a certain temperature before you put the mold, you plaster it?
No, the temperature of the clay, as long as it's not in any kind of extreme temperature situation, it doesn't matter as much. What does matter, it just we can mold it at room temperature. The clay itself is just stable. It's kind of like, if you think about like a wax, it has like a pretty high melting point. So as long as we're not in 150 degree oven or something, then we can make a mold of it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I'll show you around a little bit more.
What do you do with those little ones that are the mock-ups?
We often keep these as like a record, but sometimes, and this would be a little big for that, but sometimes people from the institutions that we make them for want like a smaller mock-up for like trophies and things. So for example, this tiger, We did this tiger for DePauw University. I love that their name has the word paw in it, and it's a
Yeah.
tiger. But so we had this tiger as our maquette, and we made a like larger than life size one. But then for like awards at the school, we actually had this scanned and digitally reduced to like, more like the size of this head, like desktop size, like paperweight size. So then that is used as a trophy. But often the maquettes are just our record of what we've done, and that's really kind of cool in and of itself. For example, these are two maquettes. One was the smaller first one, and then this was the second stage where we were really ironing out the details. And this is for a Liberty statue we did that's in Alabama. And the full-size statue is down there, but we have the maquette in our studio. And sometimes we actually have a full-size record or cast of something we did. For example, this is a plaque that's part of a tunnel in Boston. So the tunnel itself has a bronze, but we have our own plaster positive here. So it's kind of like almost an archive or a record.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And we
Looks
do
like there's
some.
nothing. Oh, sorry.
Oh no, go ahead.
It looks like there's nothing. No, there's nothing you haven't done there.
Well, I
It's
was about
so
to get
incredible.
to that because we also are doing some chickens right now, and these are not our sculptures, but we mass produce them for a gallery that sells them. So sometimes we just get to do these silly chickens, which have the funniest little faces.
Those are cute.
Yeah, they're really cute. And this is his top half is down there still, but this is a sculpture that is part of our plaster reproductions that I was talking about at the beginning. But the customer called and they just wanted a wooden base for it, so we designed it and assembled it, and we'll be painting that as well. And we have like a wood shop here. Danger. So we have like a table saw and a bunch of the other wood shop materials. And I usually have nothing to do with this area. It is totally intimidating to me, but we have a master, a woodworker who he's in his 80s now. He's amazing. And he's originally from Greece, and he used to be a furniture maker. And now he he's been doing our woodworking for probably 30 years. This is another. So what material do you guys think that this is?
It's bronzed, or it looks like it's bronzed.
Just painted
Whatever.
plaster?
Yeah, it's painted plaster. Who said that?
Oh,
Me.
how do you know that?
I was a guess, but it's amazingly painted though to make it look
Yeah.
like
Wow.
metal.
Okay, well, that was Jessica. Yeah, if there was a giveaway, I think you should win the prize, but I don't think we have a giveaway for this one. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's one of the fun things too, is we get to do, it's called a patina. We get to do patinas on plaster to make them look like other materials or to make them look very old. So for example, this is a plaster that's new, but using like waxes and things, you can make it look old. I'll see if there's anything else. This is actually a sample I'm sending to a client. I'll try to bring it out in the sun, where I showed like a darker patina versus a lighter one, so they could choose.
Uh-huh.
So
Or do those go on just like a glaze?
So the way I do this is paint it first with just like a white paint, and
Mhm.
then we use bowling alley wax, but we mix pigments into it so that it has a color, and then we use a brush or a rag to apply that to the surface, so it gives it kind of an antiqued look.
Bowling alley wax with what in it?
Pigments like
Oh.
powdered colored
Oh,
pigments.
uh-huh.
Yeah, and that's actually
Okay.
how we did this lion, except we didn't use wax, we used like a shellac base,
Uh-huh.
and then we mixed gold pigments into that base, and that's actually small pieces of metal ground up. It's real metal, which is cool.
Wow. Hmm. What types of materials do you use for armatures under, I'm assuming do you do everything in wax clay, or do you do anything that you fire?
No, we don't fire anything here. I'm gonna go in the back of our, like, we have a little bit of a graveyard of things and see if I can find an armature.
Okay.
But basically, wood and metal are the bases, and then we can bulk them up with like things like plaster, which we're using today. So these are actually some armatures. The sun is coming in a little funny, but let me move this. This is a horse armature. So it's just a piece of wood and a pipe, and then this
Mhm.
is a really bendable aluminum wire. And the reason why we have wire wrapped around it is so that the clay will grab it and stick to it. And on this is pretty small, so you probably don't need anything else. But if this was life size, we'd probably put pieces of wood in here, and then maybe dip some burlap in plaster and wrap that around, kind of like a, like an old fashioned cast if you broke your leg, to then really build it up more under the clay. Because if you use just clay, it'll be really heavy and it might fall off. So you want to have like a nice lightweight center.
Uh-huh. Okay.
And what's nice is you can put the clay on this and then realize, oh, the leg's in the wrong spot, and you can move it. So that's a really useful tool. But if you're doing something like this, it's a flat relief. You don't really need, this is plaster, but it was once clay. You don't really need an armature. You just, cut out a piece of wood and you apply the clay.
Uh-huh.
And for this, I actually don't have no idea what this is from, but when we do things like this, we can either have a company like make the letters for us, or we actually have boxes of metal letters, and sometimes we lay them all out by hand. And that, I feel like I'm in the 1800s when I'm doing that. It's really cool.
Mhm.
I might start to slowly head back down and check my plaster, but how are people's plasters feeling? Are they still goopy, or are they pretty firm when you touch them?
Mine's pretty firm.
Okay. Um, Hello? Am I back?
Yes, we could hear you.
Okay, good. Just check that I'm in the right Wi-Fi. We have 2 zones in the building. Yep, I'm in the right one, so I should be able to go back downstairs. So hopefully I won't cut out again. Okay, can people hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, good, I'm here. All right, so this is our plaster casting section. And these are, honestly, these are the same idea as what we're working with our small molds. They're just bigger. And because they're so big, this silicone, which is similar to what we all have, needs a plaster shell to hold it in place. And in this case, it's 2 pieces because you can't pour plaster in here and then pour it out because it's bigger on the bottom. So you need to separate the 2 pieces out. And this is like a hand mold. So you can pour the plaster in here. And then when the plaster's dry, you take it out of the shell, and then you can take the plaster out. So let's take a look at our molds. I'm gonna feel mine. I hope it's dry. And mine feels good. So it's not gonna be like 100% bone dry because that takes a few days, as Katie was mentioning. But as long as like when you kind of touch it, it feels pretty solid, then all you want to do is, and I only have one hand because I'm holding the phone, but you want to kind of just gently peel off the rubber and it should just pop out.
That's great.
Yay, I see some brains.
Oh, they
And then
look so good.
they all look awesome.
Yeah.
So then I want to just mention quickly how I painted mine. What I did, and I want other people to talk about their process too, but I painted it kind of like a dark blue or a black. And then I actually wiped it off on the top so that I got like a darker tone underneath. And then when that dried, I put in the other colors. So that's kind of how I got this 2-tone effect. And a little piece broke off there. That's why there's a white spot, but you can kind of see. So, and I can't do a demo on this because it's still wet, but I just want to talk through quickly. And it'll feel warm because there's a chemical reaction happening. What you don't want to do is put this on your nice wooden bureau because right now it still has a lot of moisture and it'll be like putting a wet cup without a coaster on your nice wooden bureau. So you want to, just put it somewhere that it is not going to damage it and let it dry for a couple days. Does anyone have any questions about taking it out or anything after?
I just, to let mine dry, I set mine like crossways across the mold and kind of let it dry, like, I don't know.
So that's it.
Yeah.
Yep, that's great.
So it wasn't sitting on anything that would ruin or whatever.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And then if your mold has some extra plaster on it, you can just peel it off. Also, mine, I didn't follow my own advice. Oh, Dino, that looks awesome. Can I see that?
Whoa, that's cool.
That is so cool. Is that a heart?
This is a heart, yes.
I love
Oh,
it.
Dina, that's awesome.
If you have extra, like
Hey,
mine kind of,
competition. Mine, it's better than my husband. He ate a whole bowl of ice cream while I was doing the work, and he gets the credit.
Oh, no, you get the credit for it.
Just kidding.
What kind of ice cream?
It was Moose Tracks with mint ice cream. It was delicious, by the way.
Oh,
And biscotti on top.
Yeah, and a couple biscotti cookies.
Well, those are good. I love Moose Track too.
I like any ice cream, so I'm on board with this. If you have extra piece, like mine kind of float over the top of the mold and I have this little extra piece. I mean, you can just peel it off with your fingers, but if it still looks a little ragged or you don't like the way it looks, you can use a little fine sandpaper like that you would normally use maybe to fix a wall or something. And again, you can use spackle. Like I see on mine, I have still a few little tiny pinholes that were air bubbles. They don't really bother me, but if they bother you, or if you have one that's kind of big and obvious, you can take a little spackle with your finger and just put it in. Do people have more questions, or do you want, I can show you more now that we're in a different part of the building. There's always more to show you. So
I have a question. So do you do any of the statues for churches and things like that as well?
yep. We do a lot for churches. Is a lot what we a lot of what we do for churches is restoration. And I'm trying to see if we have anything in the build. I don't think we have anything right now, but we certainly will restore a lot of sculptures that have been in a church that maybe needs a little like extra care. We also have done things for new churches. So for Boston College, they have a little chapel there, and we did a bunch of Jesuit saints for them. And then for Assumption College, which is a Catholic college near Worcester, or it might be in Worcester, we got to do a saint for them. And then recently for their medical department, we got to actually do a Christ the Healer statue, which was depicting a scene from the Bible where Christ came and healed a 12-year-old girl. And it's right outside their medical school, and it just has a lot of meaning, I think, to the students and the people there. And so that was really wonderful to work on. And then trying to think of anything else. Our predecessors, the people who owned, because our history of our studio goes back several generations, our predecessors who owned it before us, they did a lot for churches at that time. That was more in the 60s. We don't do as much now, but we certainly do a decent amount, and a lot of restorations.
Both domestic and international clients as well?
We have domestic and international clients, but for churches, it's mainly, at least as far as I'm recalling, mainly domestic. So I'm assuming, especially since it's a lot of restorations, you want to find someone who's more local to you to do that, because you don't want to be sending a delicate piece across the ocean or whatever. But there's a lot of beautiful churches and history in Boston that we're grateful to be helping restore. And then sometimes we'll go on site at another location and perform a restoration on site. But it still has to be close enough to usually to drive, because we need to have lots of materials with us.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry, I missed the name of your studio.
Oh, it's Skylight Studios.
Skylight? Okay. And you're located?
We're near Boston in a small town, or not a small town, but a small city called Woburn.
Woburn?
Yeah. Yep.
How do you spell that?
Woburn.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
So interesting.
Yeah, it's a fun place to come every day. And
I bet.
yeah, it's I don't know. I know that a lot of you on this call have a migraine, or not have a migraine, have migraine disease. And so as a person who I'm episodic at the moment, but as a person who does get attacks, it can be really nice to sometimes have a job where I don't always have to talk to people or communicate, because my communication skills will go down, you know, when I'm in the midst of an attack. So to be able to just kind of work on clay can be really nice for those like peak moments where I'm like, I can't deal with stuff. When when I have this plaster, I can show you, you can kind of go like this with your container, and then you're able to like throw it in the trash or bang it out. There's still some in there, but I don't want to make loud banging noises. So you all would love that, right?
So considerate.
I just put a link in the chat to fill out a survey if you all wouldn't mind filling out the survey before we leave the call today. We greatly appreciate it. Any last questions for Lisa or thoughts, comments? I really have enjoyed this project. I learned to listen to instructions at the beginning for you don't have to do it twice.
Dina, it might have been okay. Your other plaster might have been okay, but you got more practice. So
I'd like to know, this is unrelated, but I'm curious what you, where you got your glasses. I'm assuming they're for migraine.
Yeah. This session today has been brought to you by two products. One is Relpax, which is the abortive I've taken today, and the other is Theraspecs, which make these glasses. And I mainly use them for screens, but if I'm dealing with like the remnants of an attack, they're really helpful because they just take down that like sensitivity to light, so I just feel like good. So these are one of their, they actually make this frame. I've been a customer of theirs for 10 years, and I have prescription lenses, so I used to have to I used to have to go to an eye store, buy a frame, explain that I don't need lenses, then mail them to Theraspecs. But now they make frames that they can put prescriptions in, so this is one of their frames. And
okay, great.
I really like them. I find the tint is so soothing. I have outdoor ones too. And I just want to address some comments. I love the comment from Jamie about hearing people speak about something they love. And then I think that's so important, like for life, but also like for dealing with migraine, because as you can see, like I mentioned, I had an attack today, but I'm all like bubbly and happy because I'm talking about something I love. So it really makes a difference. Like all these social events where we can see that. So thanks, Jamie, for your comment.
How did you get into like this field? Like, did you go to art school?
I did. So this, I kind of came at it from two directions. So one is I actually grew up here in this building, pretty much in this building. I mean, because my dad is the current owner here, and he got into it by apprenticing for his predecessors. So then I grew up around this, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do. As Dina said in my bio, I'm also a writer, and so I went to, just a regular undergrad college, and I studied art and I did a lot of creative writing. And then after a few years of just being off and doing my own thing, I just felt like a pull to come back here, but I really wanted to have a lot of the skills. So I went to grad school for art, for sculpture specifically. And after that, I came back, and I've been here ever since. So it's been wonderful to be back, and like having grown up here and then had the ability to go out and do my own thing, but then come back again has been great. But a lot of the people who come here have studied art, but some of them haven't. Some of them have come just because it's a job and we can train people. We can train people in mold making or casting. The sculpture part, you more need a education in, but for a lot of the craft part of it, anyone who's good with their hands can learn how to do it, which is really fun to see someone new come in and teach them, and then see how they're really taking off.
Lisa, how big of a team is it there?
It's about 10-ish people. It can vary. And with COVID, luckily we didn't have to lay anyone off, but some people switched to remote. So we had 2 people who did more computer stuff, and then one of them has been remote for a lot of COVID, and the other one just came back a couple months ago. I see another comment. I'm just going to read. Jamie, you went to Europe. Yeah. What's funny is I went to Italy in college, and then I came back here and I was like, wait a second. I saw that. But I didn't like make the connection until I came back here. I didn't realize what a gem I had been like living around my whole life. So yeah,
That's youth.
what?
And that's youth and maturity,
Totally. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
Jamie, you went in college too. Jamie, where did you go in Italy? I'll wait for her to reply.
I'm like typing and I'm like, I can just jump on.
Yeah.
So I went to the University of Dallas. They have a campus outside of Rome, like 30 or 45 minutes outside of Rome. They have a winery / campus. So that's where I was based. And then I was able to travel around when we weren't in class.
That's awesome. What did you study there?
Well, we just did like core classes because it was sophomore year. So everybody took pretty much the same classes. There was philosophy, religion, and literature. So we read like Shakespeare and different things like that, like as we were traveling around and seeing it and being in the places. It was really cool. And then art and architecture type things.
I love it. I did a lot of art history classes when I was there, and instead of like looking at a slide on a computer, this is really eating up my battery, so I hope I don't drop off before we end. But anyway, instead of like looking at a slide presentation, it was like, oh, and there's this famous thing, and there's that famous.
Yeah, like our history professor would give us lectures, like at the Acropolis, and people would like gather around because he's sharing like all of this amazing information, kind of like a free tour guide. Well, not free, but
yeah. That's so cool.
Yeah.
So I have 10% battery left. So maybe any last questions before my phone dies?
This was just wonderful. I loved it.
Oh, good. I'm
You
glad.
did a great job.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your expertise with us. It was a good afternoon spent. Thank you.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Maybe we'll do it again sometime.
I just want to highlight one thing that Lisa's doing, and that's a pretty cool activity. It's called the Migraine book. It's part of her advocacy, kind of what she's taking on to promote migraine and raise awareness. You can find that migraine book on milesformigraine.com. And what it is, you submit a story talking to your migraine. It has all these different prompts. So Lisa also leads our creative writing mindful events that happen. I don't know how frequently they happen, but I know we have mindful events quite frequently. I don't know. On the website.
The first and third Thursday of the month.
Yeah, and I think my next creative writing one is in June, like mid-June. I forget the date. But I can quickly pull up the link for the book and put it in.
Oh, Helen's on top of it. So
yeah, we posted it in the chat.
Yeah, definitely encourage you to look into that. And if Elisa is a great host for the creative writing events, I've attended it and absolutely loved it. So if you're ever trying to pull out that creative writing, definitely attend the event.
You don't have to have any writing experience. You don't have to share what you wrote. So like, don't be intimidated. Just come on over. It's fun.
And when is that?
I don't know when the next date is, but it'll be up on the schedule when they get it.
Oh,
final.
gotcha. Oh, yeah. Right. Okay, I get that.
Oh, Helen just posted the link to the mindfulness series. So it'll pop up on there once the dates are finalized for the next one.
Got it. Okay, dokie.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you for
Yeah,
the
thank
tour.
you.
Thank
This
you,
was so much
Lisa
fun.
and Dina. Thank you too.
Thank you, Dina.
Thanks
thank you, Dina,
everyone
so much.
for hopping on and